friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. We are out in the garden today and I want to chat about garden pests and solutions. The most common garden pests that plague our backyard gardens. We're going to talk about cutworms and squash bugs and vine borers and flea beetles and caterpillars and all the things. And then we're going to talk about natural solutions for those pests. We only use organic practices in our garden, so those are the types of things that you're going to see in this video. I'm going to take you through the garden and we're going to hunt out and find instances of each type of insect. I'm going to talk to you about like the bite marks that you can look for, the type of holes that you can look for to help you identify what kind of pest it is in the first place. And then we will match those up with the all natural solutions for them that I have found that works for me, and hopefully they'll work for you too. Okay, let's get started. If you would like help planning a productive garden, scroll down to the description box of this video and click this link for a free garden printable. We calculated quantities for a year's supply of the most common garden vegetables and organized them into a neat chart to help you plan. We'll send it straight to your inbox. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming tutorials on gardening and food preservation, food storage, and more. Let's start right here with the cabbage. So cabbage, in general, the main pest that you're going to find on any of your brassicas, so your cabbage, your kale, your broccoli, your cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, it's going to be caterpillars. And more specifically, going to be the cabbage looper. If you see bite marks that are circular in nature, and especially that start on the outside and then work their way inside, that is a telltale sign of caterpillar damage. As you can see, I have plenty of caterpillar. Let me get that so you can see that hole. See how it starts on the outside and goes on the inside? That is caterpillar. So as you can see, I have plenty of those, and that's because I didn't do my normal caterpillar remediation that I normally do this year, because I was testing out shade cloth, and I was testing out a theory that I could use my shade cloth and use it as also an insect barrier, and it didn't work because it turns out cabbage needs that full brunt of the sun, especially at the end of the season where we're at now and they are starting to really mature and head up. They really need that sunlight. So it didn't work. So you can see I've got some holy cabbage here. It's certainly not enough to kill the plant, certainly not enough to keep us from getting a decent harvest here in about a month. But I want to talk to you about the two solutions that I have used in the past when I wasn't experimenting this year. Okay, so there are two primary methods that I have used successfully in my garden to combat caterpillars, pretty much caterpillars of any type, but especially those cabbage loopers that affect the brassica family. Number one is going to be BT. BT. You can pick this up anywhere that sells pesticides. Now this is organic. This is not something that is going to be toxic to humans. It is actually a bacteria that is naturally found in the soil. And this is something that you would just dilute. There's a chart, it comes with instructions, and it's something that you would dilute in a spray bottle with water and then just spray down your plants. This is actually not my absolute favorite go-to. However, I will say it's probably the most effective. So if it's the most effective, why isn't it my favorite go-to? And that's because it can kill some other beneficial insects. And if there is something that can potentially kill off the good guys, I would rather not use it in my garden. Now, if it's a matter of a total infestation and it's a matter of me getting a harvest or not, then I'm going to go ahead and use the BT. But my preferred method is number two, and that is just to simply cover the cabbage with tulle or insect cloth, insect cover. This is just tulle that, you know, people make tutus out of. It works fine. It is thinner, so it does tear easier than your actual insect cloth that is made for that purpose, but I find that it is so cheap that it's fine if I have to replace it each year. I think it was $10 for enough for everything that I would need for the whole garden. So anyway, all you need is your cover and then some kind of structure. I have talked in the past plenty of times about what kind of structure that I use in my garden, but just in case any of you are new and have not seen that, let me go to this. Can you see this? Yes, you can see that. So let me go to this second thing right here. So this is poly tubing. It's the same types of thing that you would use for irrigation in your garden, and you can hopefully you can see here I've got a piece of rebar here and a piece of rebar here, and it's just a matter of hammering that rebar into the ground. The rebar is about 12 to 18 inches long, and just hammering it in, and then taking this poly tubing. This is about what, 3 feet, 3.5 feet, but it all depends on how wide your rows are or how tall, you know, whatever you're having to cover. So just cut you a piece that fits the height that you need, and then just slide them over these pieces of rebar. And it is just a very frugal way to get some garden structure for insect cover, frost cloth, shade cloth, anything like that. And then it's just a matter of taking your tool, your insect cover, whatever it is, you know, that you're using, and draping it over the structure and completely covering the cabbage. The reason why this works is because those caterpillars, they're laid by the cabbage moth. And if the moth if it can't access the plant to lay their eggs, then they won't be able to lay their eggs, which then hatch into the caterpillars, which then eat your food. So if you can keep that moth from covering or from landing on your crop in the first place, you can stop the caterpillar problem without having to use something that could potentially hurt some bad guys, like, you know, bees and butterflies and that kind of thing. So I will typically I have this piece of wood. Sometimes I'll use bricks, sometimes I'll use just pieces of wood, and I will string out the tool and then use the wood on each of the sides to hold it down. That is probably the most important part, is that it has to be completely flush with the ground so that the moth can't fly up under it to get to your plants. So just be sure to tack it down with something like some bricks, some sticks, some pieces of wood, something like that to hold your insect cover to your structure. I have seen people also use clothespins before that have worked really well. So clothespins, clothespins work pretty good. But anything just to keep the netting down over your plants. Okay, so that covers anything that is in the caterpillar family. If you can stop that moth from landing on your crops, you can stop the caterpillar issue. Now caterpillars, you know, they obviously attack other things. Tomatoes is the second thing that comes to mind. Army worms, tomato hornworms, this works for that as well. The only issue is if it's something that needs to be pollinated by an insect, you're blocking the bee's ability to, or well, wasp, you know, whatever it is, you're blocking that pollinating insect's ability to get to your plants. So you would have to hand pollinate yourself. So that's the downside to using tool. Now on brassicas, they don't have to be pollinated by outside insects, so it's totally fine. There are no cons that I have found to using netting on anything in the brassica family. Okay, so let's move on to pest number 2. Okay, pest number 2 is flea beetles, and I found a good example over here on one of my tomato plants. So the way you can identify if it's flea beetles is looking for this birdshot-like holes in your leaves. You can see it looks like it's been shot with birdshot. I mean, it's just teeny tiny holes in clusters all over the leaf. It's not necessarily chew marks like the caterpillars, although, you know, they are chewing, but it just has this telltale birdshot type look to it, and that is flea beetles. Flea beetles are teeny tiny. I was trying to find, I was hoping to be able to find one still on the plant to show you, but I probably wouldn't catch it on camera anyway, because they're called flea beetles because they jump like fleas. I mean, you barely get near them and they just hop away super fast. But they are teeny tiny little black bugs. They're kind of shiny and have kind of a rounded type look to them, but they attack things in the tomato family, like eggplant. Eggplants are the worst for flea beetles. Eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, things like that. That's what flea beetles like the most. Now, in general, I don't treat for flea beetles, and here's why. The only time that flea beetles are a problem is when the plants are extremely small and tender and they're still in their very small seedling stage. This is certainly a seedling, but it's not so young that it can't take some damage and continue growing. If a plant can take the damage and continue growing, then I don't necessarily treat it. It's, you know, it's fine, it's not a big deal. But if it's to the point where you have such large numbers that they are actually taking out your baby seedlings to the point where they're not able to survive and continue to grow, then you would want to treat for sure. And for that, I use diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth, this is food grade because I use diatomaceous earth for all sorts of things, including things that is involved in our food storage, our food and food storage. But if you are using it specifically for pest control, it doesn't have to be food grade. The barn grade stuff is definitely cheaper. But since it's just multi-purpose and I don't want to buy two different types, I just go ahead and do food grade for all of the diatomaceous earth that I buy. Diatomaceous earth is crushed up fossilized pieces of shells and bugs, and if you were to look at it under a magnifying glass, it would look like broken pieces of glass, shards of glass. And basically it's kind of gruesome, but the bug walks across it and gets cut up, and it doesn't obviously like that. Doesn't like the feeling of that, and it will either die, it will cut it up so bad that it dies, or cut it up so bad that it's like, ooh, I'm not walking on this stuff, I'm going to turn around and walk away, and your plants are protected. So the way that you would treat your plants is just to simply sprinkle the diatomaceous earth. This is a new bag, I don't want to open it, but the diatomaceous earth is just a white powder. It kind of looks like baby powder. Kind of looks like flour, and you would just sprinkle a little bit all over your plant and a little bit at the base of your plant. Some people only do a ring around the base of their plant, but the plant, it doesn't take, a little bit goes a long way. So I find that it's, you know, I really want to protect the plants. If I'm using it, I'm having a serious problem. So I don't want to, you know, I want to take care of it, and so I just dust my entire plant in it. But you can also, if you need to if you need to make it stretch, you can certainly just do a ring around the base of your plant. But that is going to be the natural remedy for flea beetles. Let's move on to pest number 3. Okay, pest number 3, and what do I see but a pair of squash bugs? So let's make that number 3. Here's what a squash bug looks like, and right next to them you can see some squash bug eggs, which is fantastic because it represents the 2-stage process that I use to handle squash bugs. So I can be able to show you in action right now. Now, the first step is simply killing the squash bugs. I don't treat the plants for anything for squash bugs. I haven't found anything that works. If you do treat your plants with something and it works for squash bugs, please let me know in the comments below. I have tried many things and they just don't work so far. So I know it's primitive, I know it's really gross, but I just pick up the squash bugs and squash them with my foot. So bye-bye squash bugs. Yep, really simple, really primitive. Just pick them off and squash. Oh, there's another one, look at that, hiding down inside that leaf. Yep, there it is. So pick them off, throw them on the ground, squash them. And that's that. That's what I do, y'all, for the adult squash bugs. I will go down, we're at our zucchini rampicante zucchini right now. This is the trellis, it goes on both sides. And so every evening, I try to every evening come out here and do this 2-step process. So you saw step number 1, pick them off, squish them. I'm going to set up the camera and show you step number 2. Step number 2 is just killing the eggs. There are several ways to do this. My favorite is just duct tape. So we're just going to get a strip of duct tape and basically wrap it around our hands to where the sticky side is facing out. I'm sure you've done this whenever you've been pulling lint off your clothes when you don't have a lint roller handy. But I try to do this every evening. Many times I'll have my children out here helping me because the squash bugs really are a big problem around here. And if you don't stay on top of it, they can get out of hand really fast. So I am just going to use this tape to then pick up the squash bug eggs, and then I'll show you what I do with them. I'm gonna have to do this one-handed. I don't know how it's gonna work out. I tried to get my camera set up and it didn't work. Oh well, but you can get you get the picture. You can see what's going on. I'm just going to squish, try to get the squash bug eggs to come off onto the tape. Try one more time, get the rest of them. Okay, so as you can see, there are all these squash bug eggs. And I have done, before I had cinder block beds, look right here, I've got my cinder block beds. And what I do now is I just, since I got this hard concrete surface, I just squish them on that. And break them open, squish them, you know, they die. They can't survive that, they're done. Before I had my cinder block beds here and I could literally just pick off, squish. I would bring out a cup of soapy water and I would drop, it would take me like 2 or 3 of these wrappers to do my entire trellis here of this zucchini. They affect other things too, cucumbers and tomatoes. So between all of those plants, I would have 2 or 3 rolls of this duct tape. And at the end of the day, when I was done hunting, I would just drop the entire roll of duct tape in that soapy water, let it sit there for a little bit, and then toss it out. So, you know, they would be dead at that point. But now it's just really easy to come over here to the concrete and smush them, and I'm done. So that takes care of these squash bugs and these squash bug eggs. If you can get the eggs before they mature and hatch, you can really keep that squash bug population under control. Since we're here at the zucchini trellis, I'm going to go ahead and get set up and show you squash vine borers. I don't have any right now. Squash vine borer season typically for us starts in June. It is only the second week of May. Oops, I see, look what I spy over there. Another pair of squash bugs. So, I'm gonna go get them real quick. And then we'll come back and talk about squash vine borers. Okay, I'm having a really hard time getting my angles right with the camera and just the tight spaces and my garden beds right here. Giving me some problems, but hopefully you can see this zucchini plant right here, and we're gonna be focusing on the main stem. So we're talking about squash vine borers. I mentioned it's not the season yet, but it is coming. So when it comes to squash and zucchini and anything in that squash family, even though squash bugs are a major issue, they are not what kills your plant overnight. It's squash vine borers that will wipe out your crop overnight. If you come out one day and your garden's fine, and then you come out to your squash area the very next day and everything is just totally wilted and yellow and laid over flat, you've got a squash vine borer issue. There are 2 steps to mitigating that issue. Step 1 is prevention. Step 2 is actual treatment when you have an actual problem, as with most things in life. So step 1, prevention, is wrapping your stalk in aluminum foil early in the season before squash vine borer season starts, which, like I said, for us is in June. I'm not 100% sure if that's like, you know, across the board, across the country, true for all areas. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if you have any mulch, move that mulch. Oh, there's 2 more squash bugs. Look at that, hiding under the mulch. That is one issue with mulch, is it does hide the bugs. But the pros outweigh the cons in my opinion. Uh-oh, where'd the other one go? And some more. I gotta get these eggs real quick. There's some more eggs. Let me squish them. Don't want them to get away from me while I'm here. I don't know where that other one went. Okay, anyway, squash vine borers. So I'm pulling away the mulch, and I'm just going to wrap the bottom of the stem. And what I'm going to do is try to bury the bottom, like maybe half an inch underneath the dirt and mulch, so that the bug, hopefully, you know, the squash vine borers are larvae laid by a moth. So again, that moth has to land on the plant and, you know, lay its eggs or pupae, whatever they are. So you're trying to prevent that, and they almost always go for the very base of the plant, which is why this little trick can work for prevention. It does not have a 100% success rate, but if you are someone or in an area that struggles with vine borer issues, this is a really nice first line of defense. So I'm going to go in there, bury that aluminum foil, just like I said, the bottom ½ inch or so. I'm going to try to tighten it up against the base of the stem as good as I can, and then I'm going to put the mulch back in place. So that is step 1, wrapping the bottom of your stems with aluminum foil. If you have, some people prune their bottom leaves for the specific reason of being able to wrap the aluminum foil up for the first like foot of the plant. Now, I don't have a problem with vine borer that significantly, so I'm not going to do that. But if you really have a problem with that, you might want to go ahead and prune these bottom leaves, or ever how many leaves it takes to get a foot of stem covered in aluminum foil. Now, the only time that you would want to prune, or I guess I should say the only time it would be safe to prune that much, is if your plant is already pretty tall. You obviously can't cut off most of the leaves because the leaves are needed for photosynthesis. So don't go chopping off your leaves in the name of preventing squash vine borers if your plant isn't already at a certain stage of maturity that it can handle not having those leaves. So anyway, so that's step 1, wrapping in aluminum foil. Step 2 is, okay, I actually have a borer inside my stem. So the signs that a borer is inside your stem is going to be actually this nasty yellow crusty ooze coming out from the base of your plant. And that is the sign that there's a vine borer in there, because they basically chew a little hole into the stem and then go inside that stem, and all the chewy stuff that they had to, you know, chew up in order to enter, that's what all that yellow goopy stuff is around the stem of your plant. So number one, if you see that, but number two, if you come out and, like I said, literally within 24 hours, your zucchini plant is just laid flat, wilted, you know, that particular plant is likely a goner. But you can still save your other plants if you can inject them with BT, which it's the same. BT is the same solution that we talked about for caterpillars, and oddly enough, a very concentrated form of this, when injected exactly where that vine borer is, can kill the vine borer. So a little bit of surgery is required to make this work. In the past, I have tried this twice, and while it did work, I decided that it was too much work on my part and it just wasn't worth it. And I actually stopped growing yellow crookneck squash and black beauty zucchini because they were just so prone to vine borer. When I switched to the zucchini rampicante, I really don't have those issues anymore with vine borers. I don't know if that's going to be true, you know, statewide or worldwide, but for me in my garden, the zucchini rampicante has really solved that vine borer issue for me. But when I have done it in the past, what you need is BT and a syringe, like, you know, a needle. And instead of watering this down with, or diluting this down with water and spraying, what you're going to be doing is take an extremely concentrated amount. You're not going to dilute it at all. You're just going to stick your syringe into the mixture, you know, pull out a good full syringe, and you're going to go where that vine borer is. Like, again, look for that crusty, nasty stuff. And you're going to inject the needle exactly into that area and push the entire solution into the stem. It will kill that vine borer almost immediately, definitely within 24 hours. And at that point, what you want to do, if possible, is to bury the plant up to that point. So hopefully that vine borer entered, you know, right at the base of the plant, which they tend to do anyway. So you'd want to take soil and mound up your soil, kind of like you would mound potatoes. Or even tomatoes, and you want to mound that soil up over that bite mark, over that entry point where that vine borer got in, and you can actually save your plant that way. So hopefully it won't come to that, but if it does, you do have an option where you can still save your crop if it comes to that. Okay, pest number, what are we on? Are we on 4? I can't remember. I think we're on pest number 4, and I see an example of it right over here, so let's just go ahead and talk about that while we're here. Okay, we're still here at our problem plants, those zucchini, but they can take a beating and it's okay. But we are still on our zucchini rampicante, and look at these holes. Notice that they don't start at the edge, they start kind of in the middle and they go in a line. They're not circles. That is slugs. Slugs and snails, we're going to go ahead and put those in the same category. That's what they do. They go and not necessarily at the edges, and if you just see line gaps like this in your leaves, it is almost always going to be slugs or snails. So the thing that I have found that works best for that, I've done a bunch of natural remedies like baiting them with traps, but I have since switched to Sluggo because it just really works. It's natural. It's basically iron pellets is all it is, so it's not anything toxic to you. And it's not going to be hurtful for your animals, and it's not going to hurt the good bugs. It's not going to hurt your bees, your honeybees, your butterflies, your pollinators, nothing like that. So basically all you do is sprinkle a few pellets around the base of your plant. You want to create a circular barrier around your plant. The pellets are just here. It's just these little white pellets. They kind of remind me of some old rabbit food we used to have. But you just circle a perimeter around the base of your plant, anywhere that you have slug or snail issues. Now, we tend to have slug and snail issues on our lettuce areas, kales, and brassicas the most. It's a little surprising to me to see these over here on the zucchini, but I do have my kale and mustard green and salad bed right next to it, so it's not too surprising. There's mustard greens, kale salad right next to it, so it's really not that surprising. But those are the plants that they tend to attack the most. Slugs and snails, in my experience, aren't something that's going to completely wipe out your crop unless it's just like an infestation that you can't control in the early stages. They generally tend to only bother the bottom leaves. So for instance, here's the very first set of leaves on this zucchini, and this is the very first true leaf that it formed. So right after this sprouted, this was really low to the ground, and I'm sure that's how the slug got onto there. But as you can see, that as the leaves continue to grow up the trellis, there's no issues whatsoever. And most of the time, plants can handle damage to their either first leaves or their first set of true leaves and it not affect the plant. So I haven't treated this plant, and I'm not going to treat this plant because it's not an issue. It can take it and it can survive. I do most definitely treat the kale beds and the salad beds because the slugs absolutely can wipe out a lettuce crop pretty fast. Not only that, but it's really disgusting to be going and fixing a salad and washing your greens and feel the sliminess of the slugs. It's almost enough to make me not want to eat it. In fact, I have done that before. So I definitely treat preventatively, whatever that word is, treat using Sluggo. Now there is another product that is similar called Sluggo Plus. When you're shopping for this, by the way, the camera, it's looking blue on the camera, but it is a dark green. This is an old jug. It's been sun bleached, so it looks blue. But when you're in the store, you're going to be looking, all this blue color is actually dark green in the store. So just be looking for that. But there is another one called Sluggo Plus, and it includes not only slugs and snails, but it also will take care of your roly-polies. I know that is a controversial subject, but let me bring you to a different plant and tell you why roly-polies absolutely are a problem, but only in a certain stage. Okay, next pest is roly-polies, and here is subject plant number 1. Okay, so this is a tomato plant. It used to be big and beautiful. It used to have beautiful leaves coming off here, here, and down here. And as you can see, they have been completely eaten to the nubs. This plant will not survive. It does have one leaf that is trying to grow, but I'll probably just pull it up because I do have another tomato plant nearby, and it's probably good to just not have those nutrients competing with each other anyway. So I'll probably be pulling this guy. But roly-polies in the garden and their role in the garden is highly controversial. They are actually very beneficial. They are nature's cleanup crew. They are nature's metal detoxifiers. They clean up metals in the soil. So I don't generally treat my garden for roly-polies, and I don't generally go on the offensive against roly-polies. But the problem, or the stage in which roly-polies can be a huge problem, is right after seeding, whether direct sowing or transplanting baby seedlings. Roly-polies absolutely will attack baby seedlings. They generally only want to eat decaying matter. But when these little baby seedlings pop up out of the ground, if they're direct sown or when you put them in the ground, a lot of times they will come and eat those leaves. Now, sometimes they will only eat a few little bite marks and the plant will survive just fine. One thing I also want to note is these signs when the leaves are completely eaten down to the nubs, that can absolutely be a caterpillar too. The reason why I think this was not a caterpillar and that it was roly-polies is for 2 reasons. Number 1, the first day that I came out and noticed this plant, I looked down in the soil, I pulled the mulch away, and there were dozens of roly-polies around there. That's why I think it was roly-polies. But number 2 reason is caterpillars, they won't stop at baby seedlings. Like roly-polies, they don't really chew on mature plants much. They just don't. But caterpillars, they don't discriminate. They will take down an entire tomato plant. So I have tomato plants both on the right-hand side of this one and the left-hand side of this one, and they haven't been touched. So since those other plants nearby haven't been touched, I don't think they're caterpillars, because I think caterpillars would have gone from one plant to the next. Versus roly-polies, the other 2 plants are a little bit bigger, they're more mature, and they just weren't as attracted to those 2 tomato plants as they were this little guy here. So, solution. The solution is to provide another source of food that they like better. Like I said, that they feed on decaying matter. The absolute best thing that I have found is potatoes, actually. So you just cut the potato in half longwise and face it down on the bottom of the soil. I don't have a potato here, so I'm just going to demonstrate this with an apple. I'm just going to cut the apple long ways so I can show you. Apples are good, citrus is good, but potatoes I've had the most success with. But whatever you use, you just want to cut it and place the cut side down at the soil level right there next to your plant. And every morning or every evening before bed or every morning when you wake up, you would just come up. When you pull the sliced vegetable or fruit or whatever, it's going to have lots of roly-polies on it, hopefully. And you can just go and, I don't kill them actually. I will go and take them very, very far away from my garden and place them somewhere else, because they do have a very important role in nature. But you can kill them if you want to. If you have chickens, chickens really enjoy them too. And then just put it right back. Put it right back, and then the next day do the same thing. Come up, get them, brush them off, put them somewhere far away from the garden. But like I said, I only have an apple here for today. But like I said, I've had the most success with potatoes. Just make sure to put the cut side down. Cut side down. Okay, on to the next pest. Okay, the next pest is fire ants. Now we have an entire video dedicated to fire ants and how to get rid of them naturally in your garden. I have tried all the natural remedies that there are, I feel like, and none of them worked until I tried this method. So just very quickly, you want to look for something called spinosad. Someone told me how to pronounce that recently, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, spinosad. But I actually use Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew. It's marketed for worms, caterpillars, spider mites, leaf miners. It doesn't mention anything about ants on here, and certainly nothing about fire ants. But what you're looking for, it doesn't have to be this brand, but what you're looking for is the active ingredient called spinosad. That's spinosad. And what you're going to do is called a spinosad drench. And you're basically adding this to a gallon of water and drenching the ant mound with it. It takes about 2 weeks. Like I said, we have a whole video dedicated to that. I show you start to finish, and I show you the results right there on camera so you can see for yourself that it works fantastic. So I will link that in the description box below about getting rid of fire ants in your garden using this stuff right here. The last pest that I want to mention is cutworms. I don't have an example of this, thankfully, to show you in the garden, but we're kind of past the stage where cutworms are really an issue. So cutworms, they're grubs. They look like white, thick, nasty looking worms. They're grubs, so they're really thick, a ton of little legs. And what they do is they basically wrap their bodies around the stem and snap it off. So what you're looking for is snapped off pieces of seedlings. All that's going to be left is a tiny little stem sticking out of the dirt. So if all you have left is a tiny little stem sticking out of the dirt, you have a cutworm issue. It is going to be most common right in the early stages of your garden, either when you have the sprouts have just broken ground, if you direct sowed, or within the first week or 2 or 3 weeks after transplanting or transplants. That's when cutworms are going to be an issue. The only thing that I have found that works really, really good for those is to preventively wrap the stems in aluminum foil, just like we did for the squash vine borers. About 3 years ago, I had cutworms take out my entire cucumber crop overnight. The transplants were only about 6 inches tall. I had about 15 plants, and they took out every last one of them overnight. So now when I direct sow my cucumbers, and I will wait until they are a few inches tall, and hopefully the cutworms won't be an issue until then. But then I go ahead and I just proactively wrap the stems in aluminum foil, and that has been enough to allow those seedlings to make it to a maturity and to continue to grow. Now, I haven't had much of an issue with cutworms, at least for me. Once I had those aluminum foil around it, I haven't had an issue with cutworms, so I can only assume that the aluminum foil is working. Now, I think that the caterpillar treatment, the BT spray, I left it over there, but the ones that we talked about at the beginning of the video for the cabbage, I think those work on cutworms too. But again, I don't like to spray things just willy-nilly throughout the garden. I really want to be careful to protect my pollinator population. But if you have a severe cutworm issue, I think the BT works for those cutworms as well, because they're kind of, they're in the worm family. They're in the worm and grub family, which that tends to work well on. So if you need to, you can spray with the BT spray. on the back of that BT spray, and all of the store-bought stuff, they're all going to have dilution rates. So always check the chart and dilute it properly, because like fertilizers, pesticides can accidentally, kill off your plants if you use too concentrated of an amount. But speaking of that, remember, we do use a super concentrated amount for those vine borers, and injecting it with the syringe right there at the moth, it doesn't kill the plant. So you don't have to worry about that if you're using that sort of treatment for the squash vine borer. Okay, y'all, I think that about covers it. I just want to briefly mention that, I can't remember if I said it, but all of your caterpillars, I know there are so many caterpillars out there, all different names, all different species, but all of them work with either the BT spray or covering your plants with tulle or insect fabric. If it's a pollinating plant, just remember to hand pollinate yourself. One quick tip, if it comes to that, if it comes to having to cover your plants and hand pollinating yourself, one way that you can do that with your tomatoes that won't take you too terribly much time is to take an electric toothbrush, turn it on, and put it on those petals and make it vibrate. I recently learned that tomatoes actually don't have to have bees to take pollen from one flower to another. Tomatoes can actually be pollinated with the air. Like when wind blows through your tomato plants, the pollen can be blown off of the flower and onto the next flower. And since tomato flowers they sprout in clusters, it really works especially well for those tomatoes. So I think that's why the electric toothbrush, I've always wondered, I've seen the electric toothbrush being used, and I used it last year on tomatoes. I didn't do like a strict A/B test, so I can't really say for sure how well the electric toothbrush worked, but I have seen this used by people that I trust, so I think it probably worked pretty well, or it works pretty well. But I think that's why it works really well, because tomatoes can be pollinated with just some wind, and that electric toothbrush makes those flowers shake real good and get that pollen dispersed. So if it comes to the point where you are having a major caterpillar problem, go ahead and cover up your plants with insect cloth or tulle, and just go ahead and hand pollinate yourself, because at least then your crop won't get wiped out with caterpillars. Okay, y'all, I hope that was helpful, and we will see you next time. I'll pop up the video for that fire ants right around here, and you can check that out if you haven't seen it already. We'll see you next time. Bye.